I'm going to just very quickly give some basic data and my various explanations, a multifaceted, quick run through possible explanations for what's going on. You should, I imagine, all know this. Crime went up in the 80s and early 90s. It went up a lot in the early 90s, and then it fell. This is British Crime Survey crime, i.e. crimes committed against people and their property. And it looks like, this is from today's publication, it looks like that downward trend is still going on. Put the CSEW beside the police stats, and it's pretty much the same figure. This is last year against this year, calendar year, and you can see that there's 6% fall in violence, 15% fall in criminal damage, 8% in offences against the vehicle, etc. Both the crime survey and the police stats are showing a downward trend. And I think you've got to be pretty determinedly sceptical to say this is all an illusion. There are some sorts of crime, technical crimes, cybercrime, new crimes that are probably going up, but the body of volume crime is almost certainly going down, and it'd be interesting to see if anybody can mount a persuasive argument to the contrary. What I want to do in what must be about 6 minutes left is to, first of all, say whether I think these are damn lies or not. I then want to talk about crime-specific explanations, then about general explanations, and finally about interactions between all the explanations. And finally, I want to just address that question of why the recession has failed to cause crime to flip up, as most criminologists have been predicting since 2007. I was very confident in 2007 that we would see an upturn as growing income inequality kicked in. And I'm reaching a point where I've got to say, could have been wrong. So basically, I may be the wrong person to listen to. I don't think that this is a question of damned lies and criminal statistics. As I've said, CSEW and the police statistics tell the same story, and it's not just one big story. There's a twist to that tale, which is that probably in the last couple of years, 2 or 3 years, the police stats may have overstated the rate of decrease, because they have fewer resources to record crime and are under less pressure to do what's sometimes be called red tape recording. So there may be a slight divergence, but basically crime's going down. Here are some crime-specific explanations for why this might be happening. You'd expect that different sorts of behaviour would be driven by different things and would follow different trends. So, for example, vehicle crime, getting better security. Radios are inbuilt, you can't take them out. I've no idea how to remove the radio from my car now, but I could do it 20 years ago. Didn't do it, but I could. Burglary, better, similar story, better alarms and locks, but then a different factor, the value of stealable goods, things like stereos, has plummeted. So there may be less motivation to burgle. And take violence and other expressive crimes like vandalism. The obvious but much ignored explanation that is specific to expressive crimes is that young people are boozing less. I don't think people recognize this, but since the mid-2000s, alcohol consumption amongst the under 25s has been falling. I think it's to do with a greater health consciousness, or a pricing factor, I don't know. But the consumption is going down, and violence could be falling as a consequence. And I'm sure within this room we could find a lot of other crime-specific explanations. But what is puzzling is that the trend for most of these categories of crime are all tracking each other. We're not getting completely disparate trends, which suggests that something, as Mark was saying, something bigger may be at play. Here are some of my general explanations. I think one's got to give a bit of credit to the police, especially as Sarah's in the room and she's the 18th most powerful woman in the country. It would be strange if the police had no purchase on crime. It would be disappointing if they'd not increased their purchase on crime over a period of very considerable growth until recently in staffing. Ditto for imprisonment. The imprisonment rate has gone up. Prison population has doubled since 1991, and it's difficult to resist the argument that that has had some impact on crime rates. Not a big impact, but some impact. And there are estimates of the size of that impact. Possibly, I mean, the heroin market is contracting in Europe and in England, and levels of drug-dependent users are shrinking. That ought to bite on all sorts of crimes where acquisitive crime is committed to fund drug use. Then you get into the wacky ideas about, I don't know if they're wacky, I think they're wacky, yes. Social media and the Xbox factor. Kids spending so much time texting each other and meeting because they've texted to arrange to meet, and they can't meet but they play on their Xbox, that they've got no capacity left in their lives to do any crime. That might appear a commonplace in 10 years' time, but it has a certain implausibility to me at the moment. Nick Groombridge doesn't do any crime because he's twittering all the time. But I don't think you've got a Wi-Fi connection at the moment, so... and then even looser ideas about broad cultural shifts. Could it be that there quite clearly is a very long-run trend in intolerance of violence and improved civility? If I had to walk around London now or in Pepys's time, I'd do it now, unless I had a big sword. You had to have swords when you went around London. You don't need them now. And there may be oscillations around that trend. If you have a long-run increase in civility, and there may be short-run, like 10 or 20 years, or even 30-year oscillations around the trend. But that gets quite complicated. How am I doing with time?
Very interesting.
The third idea is, I think, got quite a lot of legs to it, about benign spirals and interactions. I like the idea that's coming out of work done by Graham Farrell and Mackie Tessaloni in Loughborough? Yeah, I think so. About debut crimes. If stealable cars and stealable parts on cars create debuts for people to learn the ropes of low-level criminality, they can then clamber up the ladder of criminality. There's too many mixed metaphors there, but you get the idea. If you take away the debut activities, you can't progress. If there aren't enough mates who know how to do and nick things from cars because they've stopped doing it, you haven't got mates to do crime with. And if nobody else is doing it, you may do it less. The fact that everybody's doing it makes it more likely that you'll do it. And if the number of people doing it shrinks, that may set up a benign spiral. Those things could interact to create a shrinking market for stolen goods. I've seen they work on this, but the market for stolen goods, ought to be contracting with the contraction of thefts from cars and houses. And all those things may just reinforce the habit of compliance, because the reality is most of us don't commit crime most of the time because our habits are not to even think about it. Habits ignored in criminological explanation. Finally, let's just have a think about the recession. This is Banksy's commentary on the recession, and it carries an implication of what ought to happen when you find your desired lifestyle is out of stock. In the two previous recessions, early 80s and 90s, were characterized by increasing inequality, a rise in individualistic consumerism, a sort of celebration of individualistic consumerism, and sharply rising crime, especially in the second of those recessions. Crime really ramped up. It ought to have done it this time. We've had 4 years now, quite enough time for a good recession effect, and as I said, I've lost patience about waiting. When I started this presentation this morning, it was going to be a triple-dip recession, and you can tell I'm on the button with topicality. We've got rising inequality, certainly, but perhaps there isn't that sense of thwarted entitlement that I think happened in the 80s and 90s. Dare I call it the Thatcher effect? I think the meaning of a recession isn't the same each time a recession happens. And it could be that the social meanings constructed around this recession are somehow different to previous ones. So the people who are most affected by the recession, the victims of the recession, may not see it as the same justifying or crime-generating phenomenon as happened before. That's all I've got to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you.